I hadn't planned on staying at the office that late. As a woman living a 45-minute drive from work, late nights were never ideal, especially knowing I'd have to drive home alone in the dark. There was something unnerving about the thought of being out on the roads when the sun disappeared and shadows swallowed the landscape. But work had a way of piling up unexpectedly. One minute I was wrapping up my day, and the next I found myself drowning in a mountain of paperwork, the clock's hands spinning like the wheels in my mind, urging me to finish just one more task. Finally, I packed my bag, glancing at the clock as it ticked past the hour I had hoped to leave. It was supposed to be a simple drive home, just like any other, and I didn't think much of it as I got into my car, ready to unwind from a long day. The familiar smell of the leather seats and the soft hum of the engine usually brought me comfort, but that night, an ominous feeling settled in my stomach. As I pulled onto the highway, the asphalt stretched ahead of me like a dark ribbon, disappearing into the distance. The trees lining the road stood like silent sentinels, their branches clawing at the night sky. I tried to shake off my unease, telling myself it was just my imagination. After all, I was a grown woman. I knew how to handle myself. It wasn't until I was on a long, empty stretch of road, far past the time I had expected to be home, that I noticed the gas gauge needle teetering precariously on the edge of Panic shot through me like electricity. Why hadn't I checked the gas before I left? My heart raced as I glanced around, hoping for a miracle, a gas station, a friendly face, anything that could provide a glimmer of hope. In front of me, the road seemed to stretch on endlessly, with dense woods hugging it from both sides. I knew there wasn't a gas station for miles ahead, and the chances of running out of fuel were going up by the minute. The darkness pressed in, thick and suffocating. My headlights were the only source of illumination, and as the radio crackled with static, I reached out to adjust the dial, desperate for some background noise, something to make the isolation less overwhelming. But no matter how much I fiddled with it, the radio remained silent, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the quiet hum of the engine. Then, as if on cue, the car gave a violent shudder. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles whitening, praying the engine wouldn't fail me. But it was no use. The sputtering came once, twice, and then, with a final gasp, it died altogether. The momentum carried me a few more yards before I came to a stop on the side of the road. The silence felt even more oppressive now that the engine was off. "Great," I muttered, leaning back in my seat. This wasn't how I envisioned my night ending, stranded in the middle of nowhere. No cell signal, no gas, and no one around to help. I fumbled for my phone, my heart sinking as I looked at the screen. No bars. Of course. I sat there for a while, debating my next move. I could start walking, but the road was dark, and I'd walk miles before finding a gas station. Besides, what if someone drove by while I was gone? I didn't want to leave my car vulnerable, so I waited, hanging on to the slightest bit of hope that another vehicle would come by. It had to, right? This was still technically a main road, even if it didn't look like it. Minutes stretched on like hours. Just me and the distant chirping of crickets. I glanced in the rearview mirror, hoping for a flicker of light, but nothing. I squinted into the darkness ahead. Still nothing, just an endless sea of black. Just when I was about to give up and resign myself to a long, uncomfortable night, a flicker of light caught my eye. Headlights. My heart leaped with hope as a car came into view, its lights growing brighter as it approached. I could make out the outline of an older model sedan, its paint faded and chipping. I leaned forward, my anticipation rising as it slowed, then came to a stop just a few feet behind my car. Relief flooded through me. Finally, someone had stopped to help. The driver's door opened. and a man stepped out. He was tall, his footsteps deliberate as he approached. For a moment, a knee settled in my chest, but I pushed it aside. After all, I needed help. I rolled down my window just a crack enough to hear him, but not enough to give him full access to my car. "Hey, thanks for stopping. I ran out of gas, and my phone's got no signal," I said, trying to sound casual. The man stopped beside my window, his smile friendly enough. "No problem," he said, his voice gravelly. "I can give you a ride to the nearest gas station." I hesitated, feeling a flicker of doubt creep in. The way he said it, there was something too eager in his tone, too insistent. "That's okay," I replied, still trying to keep things light. "I think I'll wait here and flag someone down. I don't want to leave my car." His smile faded, replaced by a look of irritation. "You won't get anyone else out here this late," he said, his voice firm. "Come on, I'll take you. It's not far." Again, that insistence made my stomach churn. I forced myself to stay calm. "Really, I appreciate it, but I'd rather wait." The man's expression darkened. "It's not safe out here," he said, his tone hardening. "You're better off coming with me." My gut instinct screamed at me to keep the window up, to keep him out. I looked around, hoping for another car, a sign of anyone else, but there was nothing, just me and this man. "I'll be fine," I said a little more firmly this time. "Thanks for stopping, though." For a moment, he didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me, his eyes cold and calculating. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. Then, without warning, he reached for the door handle. I reacted on instinct, hitting the lock button just as his hand made contact with the door. The sound of the locks clicking into place seemed to snap something in him, and he banged on the window hard enough to make the glass rattle. "Open the door," he demanded, his voice low and menacing now. "I'm trying to help you." I shook my head, inching away from the window, my hands trembling as I fumbled for my phone again. Still no signal. "Go away," I shouted, my voice stronger than I felt. But he didn't leave. Instead, he started circling the car, his fingers tapping on the windows as he moved, his breath fogging the glass. I could hear him muttering something under his breath, though I couldn't make out the words. I shrank down in my seat, praying that someone else would come by, that another car would show up, or that the man would get bored and leave. But he didn't. He kept circling, his fingers trailing over the windows. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to think. What could I do? I couldn't just sit here, but I also couldn't get out. I was trapped, and he knew it. That's what he wanted. He was enjoying this, seeing me scared, seeing me helpless. And then, as if the universe had heard my desperate plea, headlights appeared in the distance. They were faint at first, just a speck of light on the horizon, but they were getting closer. I turned in my seat, craning my neck to see. The man saw them too. He stopped circling the car for a moment. I thought he might try to stop the other car, wave them down, but instead, he froze. His expression shifted from anger to something more cautious. The other car was getting closer now, its headlights flooding the road, and the man took a step back, then another. Just like that, he turned and hurried back to his sedan, slamming the door shut. Within seconds, he was gone, speeding down the road like a coward fleeing the scene. The other car slowed as it approached, the driver rolling down the window to ask if I needed help. It was a family. I nodded, unable to speak, still shaken from the encounter. They shared their mobile data with me so I could get in touch with a tow truck. As I sat there waiting, I kept looking down the road, expecting to see that man's car reappear. But he was gone, and I was safe. It's been years since that night, but I've never forgotten the look in that man's eyes, the way he circled the car like I was his prey. I've never run out of gas since then. I make sure my tank is full before I go anywhere, and I keep my doors locked even in broad daylight. We'd been driving for hours, heading back home after a week-long vacation trip in another state. The car was filled with that end-of-trip exhaustion, and we were ready to be home. But the miles stretched on like a never-ending labyrinth, and it felt like we'd been on the road forever. I kept glancing at the clock, noting how late it had gotten. "We should stop for the night," I suggested to William, the fatigue evident in his eyes. "We can find a motel and finish the drive in the morning." He shook his head, determination lining his features. "We can make it home tonight, just a few more hours." I sighed, knowing he was right, but my body screamed for rest. I stifled a yawn and settled back into my seat, trying to distract myself with the passing scenery. The trees began to thin out, and I could see the sky stretching overhead, darker now, almost suffocating in its vastness. "Do you see that?" William suddenly said, pointing toward the right side of the road. I turned, following his gaze. In the distance, a flicker of light caught my eye, just a glimmer against the dark landscape. "What is it?" I asked, squinting to get a better look. "I think it's a gas station," he said, and I felt a surge of relief. "Let's stop and fill up." As we pulled off the highway and into the gas station parking lot, I noticed how eerily quiet it was. The neon lights of the gas station flickered against the night sky, illuminating the lot in a sickly glow. "It's late," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. William nodded, but he didn't seem concerned. He hopped out of the car, leaving me to ponder the strange stillness that enveloped the place. I watched him fill up the tank, my thoughts drifting to the events of the night I'd run out of gas all those years ago. As I sat in the car, I felt the familiar prick of anxiety creeping back in. I tried to shake it off. I was safe. I was with William, and there was no reason to feel on edge. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the still night air, causing me to jump. I glanced around, heart racing. The sound had come from the direction of the convenience store attached to the gas station. I could see a shadow moving behind the window, and my instincts kicked in. "William!" I called out, panic rising in my chest. But he was still focused on the gas pump, oblivious to the strange noise. "Just a minute," he shouted back, finishing up. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to get out of the car to warn him, but something held me back. I kept my eyes trained on the store, watching as shadows moved in and out of view, their shapes shifting like phantoms. "Come on, hurry up," I muttered, my anxiety spiking. Finally, William finished pumping gas and made his way toward the store. I watched him go, feeling like I was losing him to the darkness, like he was disappearing into a void. I leaned forward, my heart racing as I tried to see what was happening inside. The door swung open, and I saw William step inside. But the moment he did, the shadows seemed to envelop him. My breath caught in my throat as I scanned the lot again. I was alone, and the stillness felt suffocating. My instincts screamed at me to leave, to drive away and get out of there, but I couldn't abandon him. I reached for my phone, willing it to work, but of course, it had no signal. Just then, I saw a figure emerge from the shadows in front of the store, and my heart dropped. It was a man, his face obscured by the darkness. He seemed to linger by the door for a moment, watching me with an unsettling intensity. I could feel my breath quickening, fear gripping my chest as I tried to process what was happening. "What's going on?" I whispered to myself, the tension making it hard to think straight. Then, the man stepped toward the car. I froze, my instincts screaming for me to lock the doors, but I was paralyzed with fear. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears as he approached, his face still hidden. I finally managed to hit the lock button, but the sound of the click only seemed to amplify the growing sense of dread. "Hey, is everything okay?" William called out from inside the store, but his voice was too far away, and the man kept advancing, his footsteps deliberate. I was trapped. My mind raced with possibilities as I looked for a way to escape, my fingers fumbling over the lock button. I could scream, but would anyone hear me? I felt a sense of desperation wash over me as the figure drew closer, looming like a dark cloud over my small car. "Get away from me!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the night. Just as he reached for the door handle, the sound of sirens pierced the silence. Both the man and I turned toward the source, relief flooding through me as the red and blue lights flashed in the distance. The man hesitated, glancing back at me, then bolted away, disappearing into the night. William rushed out of the store, panic etched on his face as he saw the flashing lights. "What happened?" he demanded, looking around. "I don't know," I exclaimed, trembling. "There was a man, and he was coming for me." William moved closer, wrapping his arms around me as the sound of sirens grew louder. "It's okay. It's okay," he reassured me. "They're here now." As the police car pulled into the parking lot, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The officers stepped out, surveying the area with their flashlights. "What's going on?" one of them called out, approaching us. I glanced at William, still feeling the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I think he was trying to get into my car," I said, my voice shaky. The officers nodded, quickly radioing for backup as they started searching the area. I watched them move with practiced efficiency, feeling grateful for their presence. The night felt a little less suffocating with them around. After they gathered information and assured us they'd do a thorough search, I sat back in the car, heart still racing. The officers didn't find anything, but I felt a sense of closure as they told us to stay safe and be vigilant. The tension lingered in the air as we finally got back on the road, the gas station fading into the distance. I leaned my head against the window, looking out at the passing landscape. My thoughts drifted back to that night so many years ago, the fear, the panic, the overwhelming sense of being trapped. But I was safe now, I reminded myself. I had William by my side, and I wasn't alone. Together, we'd make it home. As the car cruised along the quiet highway, the stars above twinkled like distant beacons of hope. I took a deep breath, allowing the calm of the night to settle over me. Maybe it was just a momentary scare, a reminder of the shadows that lurked in the darkness. But no matter how many miles we had left to travel, I knew I wouldn't let fear dictate my journey. The road stretched ahead, and as we drove into the night, I felt a newfound determination, one that would carry me home safely. As I drove down the winding road, the gaslight flickered ominously on my dashboard. A wave of dread washed over me. I hadn't passed a gas station in miles, and the last one I remembered was at least 30 minutes behind me. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to remain calm. My mind raced with thoughts of reaching the next town, or at least spotting a rest area. But the car had other plans. Suddenly, the engine sputtered, and I felt the vehicle slow down. I coasted to a stop, the dark road stretching endlessly before me. "Great," I muttered, staring out into the vast emptiness. This was just great. I pulled out my phone, praying for even the smallest signal. My heart sank as I saw the screen display 0 bars. There wasn't even a hint of Wi-Fi nearby. I was truly in the middle of nowhere. I considered walking, but how far was the next gas station? My mind raced as I realized I didn't have a gas can. Even if I found a station, I wouldn't be able to bring anything back with me. Staying in the car felt equally risky. What if no one passed by? Or worse, what if someone did? As I started to feel the weight of the situation settle in, I noticed headlights approaching in my rearview mirror. My heart raced. Would the driver stop? Or would they just keep going? My luck so far didn't inspire much hope. To my surprise, the car slowed as it neared mine. A dusty old pickup truck pulled up beside me, and the driver rolled down his window. He was a middle-aged man with a scruffy beard and a baseball cap. He peered out at me with a friendly smile, but something about the way his eyes gleamed in the headlights made me uneasy. "Ran out of gas, huh?" He chuckled, as if this were a common occurrence. "Yeah," I admitted, forcing a smile. "Wasn't paying attention, I guess. Happens to the best of us. Lucky for you, I'm headed to the gas station just a few miles down the road. I can give you a ride if you want." No sense in walking out here. For a moment, I hesitated. Something felt off about the situation. Maybe it was the way he kept smiling, like he knew something I didn't. Or maybe it was the isolation that made me feel vulnerable. But what choice did I have? It wasn't like cars were lining up to help me, and walking seemed even worse. I looked at my phone again, still no signal. I took a deep breath and looked back at the man, weighing my options. "All right," I said finally. "That'd be great." He grinned wider, his teeth catching the light from his dashboard. "Hop in." I grabbed my wallet and phone, locking my car behind me as I climbed into the passenger seat of his truck. The interior smelled faintly of cigarettes, and the seat covers were worn and stained. He didn't seem to notice my hesitation as he started the engine and pulled back onto the road. "So, where are you headed?" he asked, glancing over at me. "Home," I replied, keeping my answers short. "Visiting a friend out of town." Nice," he said, nodding. "Not much out here, though. You sure picked a quiet stretch to run out of gas." "Yeah, I noticed," I said, trying to keep my tone light. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the truck rattling along the empty road. The further we went, the more my nerves started to flare up. The man wasn't doing anything wrong. He hadn't said or done anything threatening. But there was something about his demeanor that made me uneasy. He was just too calm, too comfortable with the situation. "So you said the gas station is up ahead?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation going. But all I could see were trees and darkness. No signs, no buildings. "Yeah," he replied. "Just a few more miles." But instead of continuing down the highway, he took a sudden turn onto a smaller road. It twisted and snaked through a thick patch of woods. My stomach tightened. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Oh, this way's quicker," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Trust me, we'll be there in no time." The further we drove, the worse it got. The road was barely visible now, like a dirt path cutting through the trees, and the truck's headlights barely illuminated the way ahead. Panic began to rise in my chest. "Look, I really appreciate the help," I said, my voice firmer now. "But I think I'll just head back to the main road. I'll wait for another car." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he pressed his foot harder on the gas. "Hey," I said, my heart racing. "I want to get out." Without a word, he reached over and locked the doors. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just some helpful stranger. I had gotten into a truck with someone who had no intention of taking me to a gas station. My heart pounded in my chest as I frantically looked around, trying to think of a way to escape. The truck slowed as we approached a stop sign, the first one we'd seen in miles. I didn't know where we were, but I knew this was my chance. Lucky for me, the doors opened from the inside, even when locked. As soon as the truck came to a stop, I reached for the door handle and yanked it open. He shouted something angry, but I didn't stop to listen. I jumped out of the truck, hitting the ground hard and rolling into the dirt. My legs were shaking as I scrambled to my feet and took off running. Behind me, I heard the truck's tires screeching as he tried to turn around, but I didn't look back. I just ran as fast as I could. The trees whipped by in a blur, and the road felt like it would never end. But I kept going, I couldn't stop. Eventually, I spotted headlights in the distance. A car was coming down the road. I waved my arms frantically, praying the driver would see me. The driver slowed, rolling down the window. "Please!" I gasped, out of breath. "I need help." The driver, an older man with a worried expression, nodded and unlocked the door. I climbed into the passenger seat, still shaking. "What happened?" he asked, glancing at me as he started driving. "I ran out of gas," I said, trying to catch my breath. "Some guy offered to help, but then he wouldn't let me out of the truck." The driver's face hardened. "Where is he now?" I looked out the back window, but there was no sign of the truck. "I don't know," I replied. The driver took me to the nearest gas station, where I finally got a signal and called the police. They said they'd keep an eye out for the truck, but I never heard anything more about it. To this day, I still don't know who that man was or what he had planned, but I am grateful I managed to get out when I did. I learned a valuable lesson. Never trust a stranger on a dark, empty road. It's funny how you don't think much about running out of gas until it happens to you. I've always been the type to push my car a little too far, gambling that I'd make it to the next gas station before the needle hit empty. Usually, I win, but that night, I lost big time. It had been a long day. I was driving back from a work trip, eager to get home and sleep in my own bed. The route I was taking was mostly back roads, nothing but fields, forests, and a small town here and there. It was peaceful in a way, the kind of drive where you could get lost in your thoughts and just enjoy the quiet. But the further I went, the more I realized I hadn't seen a gas station in quite a while. I glanced down at the dashboard and saw the fuel gauge dangerously close to empty. The low fuel light blinked on, taunting me. "There hasn't been a sign for miles," I said aloud. I slowed down, trying to conserve fuel, but it wasn't long before the inevitable happened. The car sputtered, coughed, and finally died, coasting to a stop on the side of the road. I let out a frustrated sigh, resting my forehead on the steering wheel for a moment. "Why didn't you stop earlier, you idiot?" I scolded myself. I knew full well I should have filled up the last time I passed through a small town. But hindsight, as they say, is 20/20. I leaned back in my seat, pulling out my phone to check for a signal. Of course, there was none. Typical. I wasn't about to sit in the car all night waiting for someone to drive by. The odds of that happening seemed slim. I remembered passing a gas station a few miles back, at least I thought it was a few miles. It was dark, and everything looked the same out here. With a sigh, I decided I'd have to walk back. I opened the door, stepping out into the cool night air. The road stretched out before me, desolate and quiet. The only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of crickets. I could feel the chill creeping in, and I wished I had grabbed my jacket before leaving the car. As I started walking, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see headlights approaching. But the road remained empty, just me in the darkness. After what felt like forever, I finally spotted a faint glow in the distance. "There it is," I said, my spirits lifting. I quickened my pace, eager to reach the gas station. But as I got closer, The glow turned into the eerie flickering of an old neon sign that read, "Gas." The station looked deserted, the windows covered with grime. My heart sank. I stepped up to the door and pushed it open. The bell jingled overhead, but there was no one inside. Just dusty shelves and outdated advertisements. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty space. No answer. I moved to the counter, where I found a dusty phone. I picked it up, hoping to find it working, but it was dead. Just my luck. Feeling desperate, I walked outside and looked around. Maybe I could find a gas can or someone to help me, but all I saw was darkness. I felt a wave of panic rise again, and I began to walk back towards the road. That's when I saw the headlights. At first, I felt a surge of hope, but as the truck pulled up beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The driver was an older man, his face half hidden in shadows. "Need a ride?" he asked, his voice gravelly. I hesitated, glancing at the empty gas station behind me. Come on, it's late. No need to be out here alone." Against my better judgment, I climbed into the truck. The inside was cramped, and the smell of cigarettes was overpowering. "Where are you headed?" the man asked. "Just looking for a gas station," I replied, trying to sound casual. He nodded, but the way he stared at me made me uneasy. The road stretched ahead, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a mistake. "Where did you come from?" he asked, glancing at me sideways. "A town nearby," I said, not wanting to give too much away. "Nice place?" "Sure," I replied, forcing a smile. The truck rattled along, and I felt my anxiety rising. The darkness outside felt oppressive, as if it were closing in on us. My heart raced as I tried to think of a way to escape. Just when I thought I'd lost my chance, I noticed a small gas station sign up ahead. "There!" I shouted, pointing. The man slowed the truck, but instead of turning in, he continued down the road. "Wait, I need to get gas." "Relax," he said with a chuckle. "There's another one down the road." Panic surged through me, and I turned to look out the back window, my pulse racing. "I want out." Suddenly, he slammed on the brakes. I could feel the weight of my decision bearing down on me. "Let me out," I shouted, reaching for the door handle. He didn't respond. Instead, he turned to me, his eyes narrowing. "You really think you're getting out of here?" In that moment, I realized my mistake. My heart pounded as I swung the door open, leaping out of the truck just as he lunged for me. I hit the ground hard, but adrenaline fueled my escape. I scrambled to my feet, running into the darkness. I didn't look back, I just ran as fast as I could. The sound of the truck revving up behind me sent fresh waves of panic coursing through my veins. I pushed myself harder, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear the truck speeding up, and my legs screamed in protest, but I refused to stop. I ran until I spotted headlights in the distance again. A car was approaching. I waved my arms wildly, praying they would see me. The car slowed down, and I climbed in, gasping for breath. "Please help me. There's a man in a truck, he's trying to hurt me." The driver's expression turned serious. "What?" I quickly explained the situation as we drove away, my heart still racing. I couldn't believe I had gotten so lucky. The driver took me to a nearby gas station where I finally felt safe. As we pulled up, I glanced back at the road, half expecting the truck to come barreling down the highway. But there was nothing, only the quiet night air. Later, I reported the incident to the police, but I never saw the man again. The experience left me shaken, a reminder of how easily things could go wrong. That night taught me the importance of trusting my instincts. I may have been stranded, but I wouldn't let fear control me again. I learned to always be cautious, especially when it comes to strangers. Now, whenever I fill up my tank, I remember that dark night on the road and how close I came to losing everything. It's a lesson I won't forget.